Hey, sixth grade. So welcome to the instructional video on how to put wheels, axles, bearings, and screw eyes onto your car. So the first part of this is where the location of a lot of the materials that you'll need are. First, we're going to talk about our stem cart, and you will see that on one of the drawers here, it states front wheels, interior wheels, and back wheels. And the reason it has that listed on there is because when you open up the drawer, there are three locations, one for the front wheels. Inside is the interior wheels and then the back wheels. So each student is going to need two front wheels and two back wheels. And if you're doing interior wheels, that's a different story. You might want to come and see me for that. But you'll need those items. And then you will also need the items on the side of the stem cart. What you're going to need from the side of the stem cart is pretty much everything in this level. Definitely everything in this level. You're going to need one short screw eye. You're going to need one long screw eye. You're going to need four brass bearings. So that's important to have four of those. And then you're going to need two axles. The axles are down here. I have aluminum axles on one side, and I have steel axles on the other side. So the aluminum and steel are very different. So what you have to look for is the color, and you'll see that one is darker than the other. This is a steel axle. You will only get a steel axle if you talk to me, but otherwise you would take aluminum axles. When you're done, we're going to bring you over here. And I already have a couple things that we need here. We need a pliers, which is in the cabinet over there on that door. Just open the door, it's inside the cabinet. And you'll need your car. And then you'll need your materials. So here's my two axles, my two back wheels, my two front wheels, my four bearings, and my two screw eyes. So those are the things that we're going to need for today. And it's pretty easy how to do this. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to start with either the front wheels or the back wheels. So for today, we're going to start with just the back wheels, and then we're going to go to the front wheels. And I think that's how everybody should do it. It's pretty much the right way to do it because it kind of teaches you how to cut your axles and how to take care of that stuff. So I'm going to slide you over. If you mess up in your axle on your back wheel, you can actually just pop it out, and then you can use the axle for the front wheel because the axle for the front wheel will be shorter than the one for the back wheel. And so, if you mess up, it's really not a big deal. You can just replace it. So now, here's what we're going to do. On your table, you will put the back axle into the back wheel like this. You just raise this up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And then you're going to take your pliers. And now every pliers has this flat spot on it, both sides. This pliers is a needle nose pliers, but the long part of the needle nose is their grips. This is all about grip. It's the back part that's about the snip, and then this area right here, which we're going to use to actually tap the axle into the wheel. So there's a reason we have to understand what this is all used for, because some of it we're going to be using today. So we're going to use this flat spot here, and we're going to take our axle and we're going to tap it down into the wheel. Now, eventually, and now I'm on a platform, this won't shake on your table, but I'm on a platform. And when you get to a point where you can't go anymore, don't hit it too hard. You don't want to pop the axle through the tire. So when you're tapping it down, you'll feel it stop. It won't let you go any further. At that point, don't hit it harder. We're not going to hit it harder down into it because that's going to end up popping the axle through the tire. We don't want to do that. So just tap it down, and then it'll get to a point where it's perfect. Once you've tapped it down, what you've actually done, believe it or not, is you've bent this tip here a little bit. And because you bent the tip, it won't just go easily into the other wheel. That's not going to happen. So we've got to snip a little bit off of this. And we're going to do that in a couple of seconds. But first, we have to take one of our bearings, and we're going to put that bearing onto the axle. Then we're going to take our car and we're going to put the axle through the car, and the bearing should sit right up against the edge here. See if you can see the bearing. There it is. And what that does is when the wheel is spinning, it reduces the amount of friction that the plastic wheel is putting against the car. So that's why we use bearings. It reduces friction. Friction slows you down. So if we're reducing friction, we're making the car faster. Then we're going to take our next bearing and we're going to put it on this side. Now, this is always the toughest part for kids to do. Your job is to now cut off a little bit of the end of the axle here, just a little bit. I'd say like a 16th of an inch, no more than an eighth of an inch. And some kids will say, like, how do you measure that? But the truth is, I just eyeball it, which means I just take a look. I don't want to cut too much off. And you put it in the snips part of the pliers, and then you squeeze the back end of the pliers with all of your might. Find that power, and it will snip the little back end off, which is what we want so that we can actually put our next wheel on. And to put the next wheel on is really easy. You go ahead and just put the wheel onto the axle, and then you'll take two hands and you'll squeeze them together. Now, when you squeeze them, you don't want to go too close. Squeezing them too tight would push against the car itself, and the wheels won't be able to spin. And we want to be able to spin. So that's what we want to do. So that's first step, putting the wheels on the back. Pretty simple. They should spin. Next, we'll take our front axles. Raise that up again. And do the same thing. We take our axle with our front wheel, and we put the front axle into the front wheel by tapping it down again until it can't go anymore. And we don't want to pop it through the side, so we don't want to do that. And when it's on there, then we can put our bearing and then slide it through the front of the car. And you'll notice that it seems like there's way more coming out this side than there was in the back. That isn't because I made the front thinner, although I did, but that's not the reason why. The back wheels have a longer spot that kind of hides the axles than the front wheels do. And because of that spot that hides the axles, it always seems like there's more coming out of it, but it's not. But however, we don't need that much axle coming out of the back end. And just like we did last time where we bent the axle on the back wheels, we also did it here too. We bent it a little bit. So we have to cut this off. Now what we're going to do here, and this is also going to be eyeballing it, we're just going to cut half of the distance of this. So somewhere in the middle, just pick the middle and snip it. And that's all we need coming out. Then we take our bearing, we put our bearing on. There we go. And we take our wheel and we put our wheels on. And we squeeze them together. And it will go on. And again, we don't want to squeeze them too tight because we don't want friction to form or the fact that it's going to be too tight so it won't even spin the front wheels. We want them to spin. So we've got our front wheels spinning, we've got our back wheels spinning, and then just test it. Don't drive this off your table. Just kind of see if everything seems to be spinning okay. And when we're done, our last step is to put our screw eyes on. The small one will go in the front. The long one will go in the back. Now this part is pretty important. We want to make sure that we're measuring the distance in the back before we put in our screw eye. And the reason we want to do that is because the CO2 cartridge hole goes in there 2 inches. About 2 1/4 inches actually. So we'll measure 2 1/4 inches on here. So we'll just need a ruler. We put it down. And then we'll need a pencil. And that at 2 1/4 inches, we just make a mark on the car. And there you have your mark. And then draw a dot somewhere in the middle of the car, just behind the axles, making sure that you're somewhere between the axle and that little line so that you're not drilling into your CO2 cartridge hole. Now, if you put your axles behind, or underneath, I should say, the CO2 cartridge hole, then what you're going to do is you're going to still draw this line, and then you'll put your screw eye, right in front of that line. So if your wheels and axles are back here, you'll still measure out 2 1/4 inches, and you'll put the screw eye in front of that line. If your wheels are in front of the CO2 cartridge hole, then what you're going to do is you're going to measure that same line and then put that screw eye somewhere between the line and where your axle would go through. So my axle is probably going through like right here. So I probably want that line, that dot for my screw eye to be right there. And then I'll take my screw eye and I will poke it into the wood. And now what I want to do is I want to screw that screw eye into the wood by pressing as I turn. This is a screw. This is not a nail. So you are not hammering this into your car. You are screwing it into your car. If you hammer it into your car, if you take the pliers and you smash it down, that's not a good thing. It's going to end up falling out of your car, probably mid-race, and you do not want that to happen. So what you want to do is you want to screw this into your car. And many kids ask, like, when do you stop screwing? Well, when you stop screwing it into your car is when the screw eye, I'll get this a little bit lower here. When that screw eye just misses the table, and now mine is actually hitting the table, so I'm going to screw it a couple times more. And we need a little bit of a gap, and I've got that little bit of a gap. That screw eye should just miss the table. You don't want it too high up into your car, because if it goes too high up in your car, the wire that has to go through it will rub up against the bottom of your car and it will keep you from racing. So we want it low enough so that it just misses the floor or the table that you're on, and we want it up a little bit higher than that so that the string that has to go through it will go through it with ease. Now, that's another thing. The reason for these screw eyes is because we're going to be putting a fishing line that's going to go from the back of the track all the way through the car to the front of the track. And to do that, to keep the cars on the track, we need to get them through those screw eyes. So the screw eyes the hole must be also facing forward. Now I'm going to put my next one in. And depending on where you put your axles here as well, will decide whether or not you want your screw eye in the front or behind. But you're never going to put the screw eye on top of the axles, because if you do, the screw is actually going to hit the axle and keep the axle from moving. So you never do that. But in this case, you could put it either right in front or right behind. Neither is going to make that much of a difference. So for me, today I'm going to put mine right behind my axle. I'll draw my little dot on there, and then I will screw it in. And remember, it is a screw, so we are pressing down as we turn. And it will eventually catch the wood and allow you to press it and turn a little bit easier. And when you're done, you want to lay it down on your table. And you got to make sure, you got to go real low on this one, that the screw eye has a little bit of a space between the table and the screw eye itself. Just a little bit of space. You don't want to go up too high, remember, because it's going to force the string into your car. That fishing line will rub up against the car and it will be no good. So you want to make sure it's just a little high off the table, and then double check. And when you have your wheels, axles, bearings done, you bring your car up to me and we will weigh it for its final weight. Now, one last thing. If you weigh your car with the wheels, axles, and bearings on and it's still way heavier than you want, try to figure out where you're going to get rid of the weight. And when you come up to me, you can say, Mr. Truby, I don't want to do an official weight, but can you weigh my car? And then can we discuss where I can reduce some of the extra weight? But that is the directions on how to put wheels, axles, bearings, and screw eyes on your car. Good luck. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.